Welcome to Good Goodbyes, the funeral facts podcast. We are really glad you found us. In this podcast, me, Simon, a funeral director,
And me, Tina, I'm an independent celebrant.
we're going to discuss all things funeral in an informal space to demystify what happens when we say goodbye.
Based on your questions and queries, Si and myself are two industry professionals that are going to chat through the hows, whats and wherefores. We actively work in the funeral industry in Devon in the UK. So, we hope you enjoy the episode ahead. Welcome to Good Goodbyes. Hello, welcome to Good Goodbyes. It's Tina.
And Simon, the funeral director. Hello to you all. Welcome to this episode. And this episode is going to be pretty heavily on Tina because we're going to be talking about what to expect from the first meeting with your celebrant, with your minister, with ultimately the person that's going to be leading the service. I stand at the back in my black suit, making sure all the bits that I've put together come together. But the person at the front, Tina, is the one that's going to make sure that the story is told, and we're gonna talk about that meeting and how you get the best out of that, how you get the most out of that.
Perfect. Thank you, Si. Thanks for handing over to me. Often our relationship starts it would be the same for a minister. So most of what I'm going to say, I'm sure would be the same for all officiants. So just have that in your mind that it might not be a celebrant. It might be an officiant who comes to talk to you about how you want your service to be. And I guess that's the beginning point for me, because it's how you want your service to be. I don't have a pre-described way of going about things. I respond based on what the family or the person arranging the funeral or the celebration of life wants or would like or thinks the person would like who's no longer with us. And so one of my first questions will often, let's start with where we might meet, actually. That's a nice practical thing. I could come to your home, and often do go to people's homes, which allows me an opportunity to see the setting maybe in which the person was. I might see photographs and notice things around the room that, that they were a big book reader, or there are lots of fishing rods in the hall, or it might give me some clues for questions to ask about what was important in their life. But that's not always convenient. And so sometimes I might meet at the funeral director's offices, for example. So we can meet in different places, and there'll be a phone call, and it will be to organise getting together to have a more thorough conversation. And the meeting could take between 1 or 2 hours. And that will be because it's a really in-depth conversation about what you want to have in the service. So some of these things will be arranged jointly by the funeral director and the officiant. And we kind of share lots of information, so don't we, about choices the family are making that inform the way that the service is, maybe music choices or other choices. But in general, it's just an opportunity for me to start by saying, how do you want to feel at the end of the service? As you're leaving, how do you want to feel? And it might sound like an unusual question, but people will answer it quite differently sometimes. So one person might say, I just want to feel really uplifted and like we've celebrated Mum's life. Another person might say, I want us to have that somber moment of remembering and feeling the grief. So it gives me a bit of a clue as to kind of the tone that the service might take for that family. And they might start to say things to me like, oh, Si was such fun. He would just want us to be laughing. And then you think, right, okay, we need to make sure that there's some opportunity for laughing.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
And actually it's going even prior to this meeting. This is where working closely actually comes into its own, because there'll be families that I sit with who don't have a celebrant chosen or a minister chosen or an officiant chosen, and they're looking to me for guidance for that as well. And I'm going to be gauging from my conversation who's the right sort of person to be putting them in touch with, because it's not one size fits all. Tina will not be the right celebrant for every family I ever get, and that will be the case for everybody that I work with. So it's fine tuning that in based on the conversations and making informed decisions from my years of experience of actually who do I think is going to work best for this family, who's going to really deliver what they're looking for on the day ultimately.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point to make, really, because there's a variety of celebrants and officiants, and you want that to be a good match. You want the family to feel really comfortable with the style of the person that they've been matched up with. So funeral directors are often in such a brilliant place for kind of really understanding that and making that match up happen. And once or twice I have heard from families that I know personally that they really, really felt a good connection with their celebrant, or it wasn't, it was all right. So, I think that is an important thing to say, actually. So once we are sat down and talking, I often say to families, shall we just do all the practical things first? So, do you have anything that you've been thinking about already? And when I phone them, I might say things like, this is a great opportunity before I visit to just look out photographs that, remind you of good times, or really say something about your person, like that's the time they got an award and shook the hand of the Duke of York, or this was another time when they just had a silly party hat on and they were doing their usual Christmas shenanigans or whatever. And there'll be kind of photographs from younger years and photographs from current times, etc. Especially if somebody's had a serious illness, then that can be what's most prominent in the mind, is the recent times when they've been poorly. And it's a good opportunity to go way beyond that to a past time when they were in their best of health, and to think about the whole of their life and all of the achievements that they had. So photographs and looking at photographs is a great way of starting to think about what you want from your service. Also, I would say anything that they've ever written down or collected. Some people have left little notes on poems. I bet you've seen that happen, Si. And some people have collected, like written in a notebook, I like this poem, or Auntie May's funeral, that was a good hymn. So you kind of get some clues sometimes. And sometimes I've known families mirror, like if they lost their father 4 years ago and their mother put that service together, they can mirror some of the things within that for their mother's service, which happens 4 or 5 years later. So, all these things are possible.
Yeah.
So all of those things are good things to be listening and thinking about. Some people like to get really practical and ask really practical questions, like how many pallbearers do we need, and what about the flowers, and can we have this, and is it all right to have that? And funeral directors answer loads of those practical questions really beautifully, but sometimes the officiant can help with that as well. And they don't understand necessarily some of the language. So catafalque, for example, might come up. And for most people, that's not in their common language. What's one of them, Si?
So catafalque is the platform, scaffolding in Old Latin, Italian, at the front of the chapel that the coffin sits on in the crematorium, or sometimes in church if we're not on trestles. So yeah, we could do an A to Z, couldn't we?
Yeah.
I say it as a matter of course, and you're absolutely right. Get blank faces looking straight back at you because, well, what's that?
Yeah. And I've had a family say to me, so the coffin, is that different from the casket?
Yep.
There are these things that crop up, and you're explaining like they're one and the same thing, really. Do we need a coffin and a casket? That kind of thing. And one family thought that the casket was what they lay in, so when they were being looked after and in the care of the funeral director, so they were comfortable. They thought the casket was that. And then they thought when they went to be buried or cremated, that would be in a coffin. So people do pick up these kind of questions and often don't like to ask because they just don't like to ask for all the reasons that we.
It's one of the sentences I probably say every single arrangement I ever sit down and do is there are no stupid questions. I do this all day, every day.
Yeah.
You may do this once or twice in your entire life.
Yeah.
How could you possibly know? And that's that's where you've got to lean on the people around you to answer those things.
Yeah.
I mean, from your point of view, Tina, obviously a lot easier to sit down with a family that have had some conversations, taken the time to maybe write some things down, ideally with their person, with their loved one, so that they know what they would have liked. I mean, something that I'm a great advocate for is trying to pre-plan in some way. It doesn't have to be prepay, but just pre-plan. Start putting these things in place. And yeah, obviously, I'm assuming from your point of view that is a bit game changing. That changes what's going
Yeah.
on.
I mean, I think families find it super helpful as well that the person has left behind a bit of a kind of vapor trail of like, these are the things that I would have been interested in having. And it kind of comforts them sometimes to think, at least they chose that piece of music and we know dad wanted that, or my brother wanted that. So that's helpful and it's a starting point. But what I also say to families is this is also space for you to add in other things. So, this is also about your remembrance, your grief, and your opportunity to say what you would like to say. So if you want to do a reading from a granddaughter's point of view, if you want to have someone from the rugby club say something or something rugby related, because that was a huge part of their life, then yes, all these things will find a way to weave them in. I am the gatekeeper of time. And so depending on where we're going, we can end up with lots of time or very little time. So you can always leave that in the hands of the celebrant. But as I'm leaving the home, what I'm really interested in is knowing a lot about the biography of the person. So don't be surprised to be asked questions like, what was their favourite food or drink? What did they watch on the telly? What made them laugh? What was any advice they ever gave you? Did they have favourite sayings? As well as all that, what I call autobiographical information, like where they were born, where they went to school, what jobs they did. We want to know about the whole person. So we might ask some unusual things like, what did they do that used to make you laugh? So yeah, that's kind of it really. Don't be surprised to be asked anything, I think is what I would say. So
Absolutely. And we touched on it so early on. Music, things like that are going to come up in that conversation. It's very collaborative what the officiant and the funeral director do, because obviously lots of things are going to be put back on me to compile order of service, to book if we're going to be doing a visual tribute or webcast. That may not come up in the conversation with the funeral director. It may come up in the conversation with the officiant. So there's lots of back and forth between what we do as well, to make sure that between us everything is covered, and that's a really good thing to have, working relationship wise, as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a final thing is that just that it doesn't end there. So once the celebrant or officiant has taken everything away, the way that I work personally, and I'm sure many others do, is that we have lots of other communications along the way before the day of the service or the ceremony. And that would include potentially the family seeing the whole script so they can be really comfortable with the content, with the factual accuracy and with the tone of it. So yeah, it's a very, as you said, Si, very collaborative process. So I hope that helps people understand a little bit more about what to expect.
Yeah, and it's a couple of weeks. Ultimately, we try really early on to get you in front of your officiant, so that you can have time, so that you can work with each other to get as many of these things in place as possible. Because there may be things that come up 5 days later that absolutely are not too late to get in. So yeah, it's good to. I always give your phone number out, Tina. Sorry, but you need to be reachable, and as do I. But thank you, Tina. Sorry, I put that episode on you a little bit, but I think it's a really important chat to have.
No, it's fantastic. It's great to have the opportunity to just talk about what might happen for people, because I'm sure it's a bit of a mystery for most folks. So It's a pleasure. And any questions, as Si always says, don't hesitate. Don't hesitate to ask on all our social media outlets. You know, we've got various ways that you can reach us, and it's in the show notes as well as on our social media and our websites, etc. So yeah, just drop in any question that you might have along the way.
Yep, absolutely. It'd be really good to hear from you. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing you and speaking to you at the next one.
Perfect. See you soon.
Bye-bye. You've been listening to Good Goobyes, the Funeral Facts podcast. Please do like, subscribe, comment and share. Drop any questions on our social media, on Instagram, or in the text option in the show notes.
Si and I are qualified professionals, but we always advise our clients to seek any additional support from medical practitioners if they need to. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay well and be kind to one another.